In the summer of 1936, in the opening months of the Spanish Civil War, military officers, civilians, priests, and even government officials reported a series of encounters with the same woman. A woman who shouldn't have been able to be in more than one place at the same time. But according to multiple independent testimonies, she appeared in 3 distant cities on the same day, delivering cryptic warnings and vanishing moments later. And her final appearance, well, it shook the witnesses so deeply that they refused to speak of it for decades. Tizzy's, a real documented mystery. No folklore, no exaggeration, just the unsettling truth of a story preserved in archives, diaries, and military records. Welcome to Dark Curiosity Hub. Spain, July 1936. Heat rolled across the countryside in thick waves. The war had just erupted, brothers turning against brothers, towns split in loyalty, the sound of distant gunfire becoming a daily background hum. Roads were patrolled by soldiers who barely knew what they were fighting for. And rumors traveled faster than the trains that still attempted to run across the fractured nation. In the middle of this rising chaos, a strange report reached the makeshift communications office of the nationalist troops stationed near a detained civilian. A young telegraph worker named Rafael insisted he had encountered a woman in the deserted telegraph hall earlier that morning. She had appeared suddenly, as if stepping out of the shadows, wearing a pale dress that looked far too clean for someone traveling through a region at war. Her voice, Rafael described it as come, to come, like someone speaking from far away. She had told him, "Do not stay here. The tracks will not be safe at dawn." Then she vanished, not walked away. Vanished, as though the building had swallowed her. The soldiers assumed Rafael was delirious from exhaustion. They laughed about it, locked him in a room for questioning, and moved on with their day. But the next morning, at dawn, a train carrying nationalist reinforcements derailed after an explosive charge detonated under the tracks, the exact tracks near the telegraph hall. Hours later, reports arrived from 2 other towns, each many kilometers away, each impossible to reach in the time frame described, claiming that a woman matching the same description had appeared, spoken brief cryptic warnings, and then disappeared. 3 towns, 1 day, 1 woman. The war created chaos everywhere, but not even war explained this. The first confirmed sighting was in Huesca, where 2 infantrymen guarding an empty street reported a woman suddenly standing a few meters away, her dress glowing faintly under the moonlight. The soldiers yelled at her to identify herself, but she simply raised a hand and said, "You cannot stop what comes from within." And then, as one soldier later wrote in a trembling statement, she was no longer there, as if she dissolved into the cold air. The second sighting was in where a nurse in a makeshift field hospital swore she found the same woman standing beside the cot of a wounded soldier. The woman reportedly leaned over the dying man and whispered something the nurse could not hear. Moments later, the patient's vitals spiked temporarily, surprising the medical team. Before collapsing entirely, the third sighting was the one near the telegraph line, Rafael's encounter. When soldiers compared the descriptions, every detail matched. Pale-dressed, barefoot, long dark hair calm, detached expression, a faint scent of something floral like dried lavender. Several witnesses said there was no way she could travel between these locations. No vehicle, no train, no road access could make it possible under wartime conditions. Yet the sightings were separated by less than 4 hours. Military command dismissed the reports as wartime hysteria, until one officer from Zaragoza admitted he had seen her too, not that day, but years earlier during another border conflict. He had never reported it out of fear of ridicule. What tied these appearances together? Why these towns? And why now? The mystery began pressing in on the soldiers like suffocating air. If you are enjoying these true mysteries, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to follow all our stories. Months later, in early 1937, the war grinding on, with no end in sight, a sealed letter arrived at a nationalist command outpost. It came from the convent of Santa Veronica, a remote, religious community that rarely communicated with secular authorities unless absolutely necessary. Inside the envelope was a written deposition signed by 6 nuns, the convent's mother superior, and most oddly, a visiting doctor who had been staying there temporarily due to the fighting. According to the testimony, on the night of February 3rd, the same mysterious woman appeared in the convent hallway. The nuns described her as calm, almost sorrowful, standing in the middle of the corridor as moonlight spilled across the stone floor. The Mother Superior asked who she was and how she had entered a locked convent during wartime. The woman didn't answer the question. Instead, she said, "I was not meant to live this long. I am only the echo of what should have been." The youngest nun began crying. The doctor froze, unable to speak, later describing the moment as a coldness that filled the marrow of my bones. The woman looked around at them, not with fear, not with anger, but with something that resembled pity, and then added, "When the bells ring 3 times, leave the chapel." And at that exact moment, the chapel bell, untouched, rang once, then again, then a 3rd time. The witnesses ran. Seconds later, a mortar shell struck the chapel directly, blowing out the stained glass windows and tearing open the wooden beams. If they had remained inside, even 10 seconds longer, they would have died instantly. The convent's leaders sent their testimony to the nationalist authorities, assuming the woman must be a supernatural warning of divine origin. Timiditari, however, had another interpretation. Whatever or whoever she was appearing in strategically relevant locations at strangely crucial moments. Someone began collecting all the testimonies, and that's when the pattern emerged. When mapped out on paper, the woman's appearances formed a precise line, a perfect diagonal trajectory, stretching from the northern foothills of Huska down through Teruel and ending near the convent. A line that, as one historian later discovered, mirrored a centuries-old pilgrimage route known for strange folklore, sightings of doubles, omens, and figures who appeared only during times of violence or plague. But the 1,936-37 testimonies differed from folklore in one disturbing way. All witnesses described the woman in contemporary clothing. Not a medieval apparition, not a ghost, something modern, something real. One officer proposed an unsettling theory, one that was quickly shut down by his superiors for fear of spreading panic. What if she wasn't appearing in 3 places at once, but rather slipping in and out of the same place, across different points in time? To the military commanders, it sounded like madness. To the civilian archivists, it sounded like folklore. But to the witnesses' hardened soldiers, trained nurses, highly logical professionals, it made more sense than any other explanation, because there was one detail they had kept quiet until then. Every time the woman appeared, electronics melted, radios crackled with static. Lamps flickered, telegraph equipment seized up, watches stopped completely, and then, minutes after she disappeared, everything returned to normal. It was as though reality bent slightly around her, like ripples in water. The final documented sighting came from a place no one expected: the battlefield itself. And it was this encounter that convinced even the most skeptical officers that something profoundly unnatural was happening. Spring 1937. The Battle of Guadalajara raged across muddy fields and shattered farmhouses. Rain fell in heavy sheets, turning trenches into rivers of thick brown sludge. Artillery illuminated the dark sky in unnatural flashes of white-orange light. A group of soldiers from the 2nd Brigade reported seeing a lone figure walking calmly across the battlefield, to calm, to composed, completely untouched by the explosions erupting around her. One soldier shouted for her to get down, assuming she was a civilian caught in the fighting. But she didn't react. She kept walking with slow, measured steps, her pale dress plastered against her body in the rain. When the soldiers approached, they saw her face clearly for the first time. She looked exhausted. Older than before, her eyes sunken, as if Sayadenti slept for weeks. One soldier later wrote in his diary, "She looked like a woman who had seen every possible ending, and none of them were good." They asked who she was, what she wanted, how she had reached the front lines. She responded with a voice barely audible over the rain. "I am still searching for the moment where I do not die." Before they could question her again, a shell detonated only 10 meters away. The shockwave knocked the soldiers to the ground. When they recovered, she was gone. No body, no footprints, no sign she had ever been there. Her final documented appearance. After that day, no one, soldier, civilian, priest, or officer, ever reported seeing her again. But the diaries, letters, military transcripts, and signed convent testimonies remain preserved in Spanish archives. No explanation was ever agreed upon. Some called her an omen, some a ghost, some a hallucination shared by dozens of unrelated people. But one last detail remains the strangest. In none of the accounts did anyone ever see her blink. To this day, historians, psychologists, and paranormal researchers attempt to make sense of the woman of three places, a figure who appeared during one of the darkest chapters in Spain's history, leaving behind warnings, cryptic messages, and impossible sightings. Was she a supernatural apparition? A time slip? A collective hallucination brought on by fear and exhaustion? Or something else entirely? Something that doesn't fit any category we have words for. All we know is that she appeared repeatedly, impossibly, undeniably, and then vanished forever. Tell us in the comments a topic you're curious about and want to know more about.